Hi, and thank you for listening to this third episode of Mediumystic. I'm your host, Kristen Harlow. Today, I sit down with psychic medium Juan Francisco to discuss the mechanics of mediumship, residual energy, the existence of low spirits, and so much more. It's an amazing conversation, and I really hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Juan, happy belated Earth Day to you and to our beloved host, Mother Earth.
Yes, happy belated Earth Day. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that you were able to sit down with me. You are a psychic medium who I've known for a couple of years. Um, and you are a perfect example of someone who trusted enough to simply open to spirit and then communicate what came through. You didn't start as someone who was uh, really going with the intention of pursuing your mediumship skills. You were just curious and really curious about how other people worked, right? And then you found very quickly, I think within a matter of a week or two, that you are in fact a very skilled medium and very connected to spirit. And the way that you deliver messages is usually just so spot on with the sitter, so accurate. And I was wondering if you would share what your experience is when you are delivering a message, when you are that connected to spirit, and perhaps it would help to walk us through like a specific message that you delivered without names, of course, but just walk us through what that experience is, what you feel, what you know, what you see, just to give us an idea of what an incredibly skilled medium experiences as he or she works.
Well, sure, and thank you for saying all those kind words. I really appreciate it, and I credit your facilitation of the group that you lead. I credit that a lot for where I am today. And I know I've
Oh,
told you that off camera, but I want to say it on camera, on mic too. So yeah, I owe so much gratitude to you, to Spirit. The way I see it is, I will give myself the credit for being open, but it really is Spirit that does so much of the work. I
hmm.
think I give myself credit for being open and for being willing to develop, because I know there's so many mediums out there that not don't necessarily work on development and just go with just start at it or putting themselves out there very early. And for me, it was important for me not to just have, I mean, the way that this all started was an experience out of nowhere, as I probably shared with you in the group, where I channeled my first soul for a good friend of mine in the physical world, one of their loved ones who were passed. And it was just totally a surprise in the middle of a tarot reading. And I thought, this doesn't really happen to me.
Hmm.
This soul is sticking around with me. They're making me feel the way they passed. And that's actually the only time, the intensity with which I felt their their fatal injury in that moment, I've never felt that again in any readings I've done since then. That was 3 years ago. And so it kind of freaked me out in like a odd word to use, but in a beautiful way. I felt very humbled. I felt very like, who am I to experience this? So I decided to be open. I joined your group. And then the rest is history. And I've really learned how to develop the skill a lot between going to your group, having a mentor here and there. And yeah, for me, because each medium is so different, I think that's one thing I want to disclaim before I share how it works for me, is that each of us are so different. And I don't think it makes one medium better than another. I think what makes, if we want to use the word better, is just how open the medium is to what they're interpreting and what they're receiving.
Hmm.
But the rest is really, we each have a different communication style, how we interpret symbols. And so for me, they make me feel their personality a lot, whether they were silly, more serious, they ran the roost, or they were maybe quieter. So I feel their personalities a lot. And second, not necessarily in this order, an image or it's always usually like a token, like if they left a cross or a piece of jewelry or a playing card, like a baseball card collection. They'll show me an item or an image or some type of symbol that has to do with something that we related to that soul when they were in the physical world. Um, it's very visual and it's all in my head. I don't see spirit walking around me. I um sometimes I wish I did, but I feel like if I did, I would be scared. It's way too scared to even channel. But maybe one day that will change and I'll be open to it. But I think at this point early in my development, if that were ever to happen for me, I think I realize I'm not quite ready to experience that this early in my development. But so I don't see them next to me as I'm channeling. I don't see shadows. I just feel all these images, personalities, sensations that are coming out of nowhere, and that's how I know it's them. Then I just interpret it the best way I can, and sometimes my interpretation is wrong. But if I start by just saying what I'm seeing or feeling, the sitter can help interpret that with me. So it's definitely like a team effort in my experience. It's like
Mhm.
spirit, me, the sitter, and neither of us can do it. I mean, spirit can do everything, but spirit is using us for a reason. I think neither party, spirit, me, or the sitter, neither of us can do it alone to make sure there's a message that comes through for the sitter.
Mhm.
So that's how it works in my
Mhm.
experience.
You mentioned that the first time you ever experienced this, you felt deeply how that person lost that life. And I wonder if the reason it came through so clearly then was because you are so your mind was completely out of the way. You know what I mean? You didn't even know it was about to happen, and so everything that came through just came through, whereas now and I think it's the practice of any medium or any spiritual path at all to work to become as open as possible, and it's not to shun the mind or to denigrate the mind, but in these moments of openness, the mind needs to try to be as quiet as possible, and when we allow it to become active, it gets in the way of some of the things that are coming through. So I wonder if that's part of it. It's not something that's noticeable from my perspective when I'm watching you, but I wonder if with more as you continue to develop and practice and experience different spirits, you will begin to have that. I bet you will begin to have that
I
experience again.
I think you bring up a really strong, valid point because I I still struggle. I'm 3 years into my development. I still struggle with the fear of being wrong. And I hear that most mediums do. It's just to different degrees based on where you are in your development, how confident you feel, and what's coming through. I do definitely struggle with imposter syndrome across my life, but especially with
Mhm,
this work. And I think that day when that happened, I was what happened specifically is the strength card in the tarot deck came up, and that's also the Leo card in the zodiac. And I had asked my friend, I knew she had lost this person, but I just asked her, is there a Leo in your life that means a lot to you, whether for good or bad? And she said his name. I knew he had died. I knew what the year he had died, but I didn't know how he died, or any other details about him. But I just felt like a message was coming through because that card was brought up, and I just told her what I was feeling. Just a very encouraging message. The reading ends, and then he put this image in my head of the two of them in a car singing a song, like a favorite song or their song. And that's when and this speaks to your point, I just thought, this is weird. Let me just go with it and just tell
mhm,
her, hey, did you have a favorite song? And she said, that's insane. I actually just bought last week the vinyl version of our favorite record, our favorite album. And then right after that, I felt this pain in my head, severe pain in my head. And I just felt like, I mean, not, I'm trying not to be graphic, but I just felt like I was shot in the head. That's immediately what came to mind. And I was too afraid to tell her that because I felt like I didn't want to trigger her or I didn't want to upset her. So I asked our mutual friend who confirmed for me, yeah, I think that's how he passed. And I actually looked up a news article because he was covered in the news. Unfortunately, his passing was covered in the news. I had not read any articles beforehand, and it was confirmed that he did pass that way. And I
mhm,
think because I decided to go out on a limb with what he was showing me about the music connection, it's almost like, okay, Juan is getting it. Let's give him this very severe
mhm.
feeling now. And I do wonder, maybe this speaks to your point too. I do wonder why that hasn't happened since then. I'm not asking for physical sensations because they're not pleasant. I'm just here for spirit to use me as they'd like to use me. But maybe it may be, I don't know. Do you feel that I mean, I have a thought about the different clairs we tap into. I mean, I think we can all tap into all clairs, but
Mhm.
why some clairs seem to be stronger for some than others. Sometimes I feel like we can develop them, but it's also I don't know how to say it. Like growing up, it would be called like God's will. So I don't want to call it that because for some people they don't resonate with that. But like
Right.
the will of spirit, like maybe we want to try and develop something, but it's just not our time yet, and it's really up to spirit to determine when we're ready for that. I don't know if you agree with that or your thoughts on that. I'm curious.
I absolutely agree that it's all the will of spirit, of the all that is, right? I mean, we don't I don't think we really have a say in anything, honestly. That's my philosophical opinion. I think it all happens because that's what was going to happen, and that's it. Maybe there are different realities in which another version of life has occurred, but in this version, this is what's occurred.
Hmm.
And so I do think that it's probably both a matter of it being being a directive of spirit, and then also I do think the other aspect of it, which is that some of us just have more propensity in um a certain form of communication, for lack of a better term. I have very strong clairaudience. I hear very clearly. I also have very strong claircognizance, clair knowing of situations, and those go back to childhood. You know, um, I I do see I see spirit, especially in the third eye, but I also see them in 3D once in a great while, and I sometimes wonder if that has to do with, I get migraines, and I wonder if my sensitivity to light plays a role in that somehow.
Mm.
Scientifically, I couldn't explain it, but I wonder about that. So I do think it's both about what spirit believes or feels or knows that we can process now, and then also our natural gifts and propensities. So you've never seen spirit, you've never seen anything 3D.
I have, just
Uh-huh,
never
I
during a
thought so.
reading. Just never during a reading. Yeah, it's and I do see them in my third eye, but I have yet to experience a reading like in life. Yes, I have. In reading specifically with clients or in a circle or in practice, I have not yet. Um wait, there was one time. No. Well, there was one time I saw like a swoosh. It was like a brown colored swoosh by like at the corner of my eye. That was I remember who I was reading. It was a very strong reading.
Mm.
That's one time. But in terms of full bodied, like I have yet to experience that. But yeah, I did as a kid. I did see I was on a class trip somewhere. I was in an a cappella group in college, proud a cappella, former a cappella participant. And we were like on a state championship trip in Orlando, Florida, and we were in a Holiday Inn, just like a regular hotel. And I'm walking, if you can imagine a hotel hallway that one hallway, and then there's the hallway continues forward, but then you could also turn to the right. It's like a T-shaped hallway.
Mhm.
And as we were crossing the um the hallway that juts out to the right, I saw at the corner of my eye this really brilliant, I don't know how to explain it, this golden silhouette of a person, and their I'll call it their aura, but like this what was surrounding this golden silhouette were all these rainbow colors, a rainbow
Mm.
spectrum of colors. And it was at the corner of my eye, and then it was as if they were walking through the wall. And when I looked, because I saw it and I looked, there was nothing there.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, what was that? And then the other time something like that has happened, my grandfather, the maybe 3 days after he passed, I saw the grayed out image of a young man again at the corner of my eye while I was putting garbage in the disposal room of my building. When I turned, he wasn't there anymore. And a friend who is a medium had told me, and I knew this when I saw that image, that my grandfather was in his life review phase.
Mhm.
My dog is joining us.
Perfectly welcome.
So those are the two times that I can remember where I saw full-bodied figures, but never it's always at the corner of my eye, which
Mhm.
is really interesting. But if you think about peripheral vision, I'm not a scientist, I don't know how accurate this is, but I don't know how peripheral vision relates to the subconscious, or the because we're taking information in front of us while also receiving information like I am now. I can see my altar over here as I look here, like in my peripheral vision. Like I don't know what, it's fascinating. So I don't know if that has anything to do with how open I am or how closed off I am, and that being the reason I can only see things in my peripheral vision or not.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's an interesting point. Um, and it for some reason it makes me think of those moments when you're about to fall asleep, or even in sleep when you
Hmm.
have uh, experiences that are undeniable, and how whether the two are connected, the peripheral vision and the whatever that switch is that gets shut off and on when we sleep. um you made me think of an experience that I had that I would love to share, because I think it points to something in terms of the beginning of a potential idea of an explanation of what all of this is. I in your story about being in the hotel in high school, my story was in high school as well, and I actually think this might have been the first time I ever saw anything. I was always, as you and I have talked about, and I know this was the case for you too, always fascinated by anything to do with anything inexplicable, ghosts, UFOs,
Hmm.
ESP, all of the old-fashioned terms that they used to use,
Yep.
and that still apply but are named differently now. But I had never seen anything. And then one, and it involves a cross section, just like yours does, which is interesting. My mother and I were driving down this pretty busy, I was about 16, 17. We were driving down this pretty busy street, busy enough that we got to the spotlight, and I mean the stoplight, and there was the option to turn left, and that light would be green and this light would be red, and that whole thing. So it was pretty busy. And so we got to the stoplight and we were turning left onto a road that is about a mile long, 30 miles per hour. So we stop there and we wait for the light to change, and the cars next to us are continuing to go straight through the green light. And I look up, and across the street, crossing diagonally toward my mother and I, was this very tall man, all dressed in white. He looks like a painter, like a house painter, and he had Einstein hair. He was, like I said, tall, thin, stooped over, just very noticeable, and crossing directly into traffic, just walking right through it, not getting hit. Cars weren't hitting him or going through him, but he just managed to cross through the traffic. And so I noted him. And then our light turns green. We turn left, get to the other end of that mile long road that's 30 miles per hour, stop at another light. And there is the same man crossing the street diagonally, so that he was crossing like this toward us, and he had been crossing like this toward us. And somehow it like comes on a parallel.
Hmm.
The experience of him was on some kind of parallel line. And I was like, Mom, I just saw that guy back there. She's like, I did too, actually. I saw him too. And there was no way that he could have gotten to that area. He couldn't have gotten on a bike fast enough, couldn't have walked. It was a mile at least walk. Couldn't have gotten in a car, in front of us. So that was
Wow.
my first, yeah. And it just felt, it feels like some kind of time thing. You know what I mean? It feels like he uh he was on a timeline that appeared in both places, and it just somehow seems to point to some kind of explanation, if you know what I mean. Like, not we're never going to know exactly what's going on, but just closer to an idea of what that was, because he was exactly the same in both of those
Hmm.
iterations of himself. He hadn't changed at all, in two different
Wow.
places, a mile apart, and both of us saw him.
It makes me wonder if it was like there is the term called residual energy that's
Mhm.
used, like when, I'm sure you're familiar, like when energy, like me going up and down a staircase every day of my life, I'm leaving an energy imprint, and then people beyond my physical life who come after me may be able to catch glimpses of that energy imprint. So I don't know if it's that, but that's fascinating.
Mm.
And yeah, that's pretty incredible. That's wild.
That's an interesting way to put it. I do think it's some kind of residual, an energetic residual, like repeat, rinse and repeat, And is that what we're all experiencing when we connect to spirit, what we label as spirit, right? But that's a symbol, right? A word is a symbol. So we don't
Mhm.
even really, we just have no clue.
Yeah, we can
But
encapsulate it in just words.
right.
Yeah.
But we're connecting to some repeat incident, I guess, although a lot of times it's interaction. I mean, interactive. It's the spirit or the experience is perfectly present. It's not watching the repeat of anything. It's an actual live experience.
Yeah, I think both can be I mean, I don't know actually. I've heard so many stories of people like in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, seeing like a band of soldiers marching through the fields, but
Mhm.
the soldiers are not paying any mind to tourists around. So
Mhm.
it's like I think that to me sounds like very much sounds like residual energy. But I've also heard stories. My grandfather, in addition to appearing to me that morning in the garbage room,
Mm.
later that at midnight later that day, rang my doorbell 2 times within a half hour and nobody was there. I knew it was him because I asked him to do it the second time and he didn't. So it was
Wow.
wild. It's the most wild thing that's ever happened to me. And it was one of those like in a pre-war building, you have those old boxy doorbells where you have to pull a lever. It's not like a digital, it wasn't a push button, it was a lever. So
Mm.
it's not something that could have been digitally manipulated or could have like had a malfunction because it didn't happen after that either. So that was a really good example of my grandfather interacting with me, but actually doing it on command the second time. So
Mhm.
I think both are possible. I think we can see imprints of energy because it's neither created nor destroyed. But I don't like to use this word. I'm trying to think of a better word these days, but like I think there's residual energy and then intelligent energy, which is just
Mm.
the energy that isn't residual. It's actually present conscious energy.
Okay, that's interesting because you touched on something I was just about to share, which goes along with that idea of energy being in everything, right? It's not just in a sentient being. Energy exists in all things, and when I was in college, I used to spend a lot of time at this house that was very old, and at one time back in history, probably early 1900s, was kind of a party place for the glamourati. They didn't have that word back then, but those people. And I think even in the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s, I think even like Robert Kennedy would party there, and like Robert
Wow.
De Niro, just kind of people like that who are very well known. And then the school that I went to purchased the house, or somebody associated with the school purchased the house and started renting it to students. So it became student housing and fell into some disrepair. But one of the interesting things about it was, and I spent a lot of time at this house. A lot of my friends lived there over the years that I was at school there. And one of the interesting things about it was that the people who lived there way back when, and I think even the people at the time that I was visiting the house would leave items behind when they moved out. So, for instance, there was like a 1920s Mickey Mouse viewfinder that was left behind there that was still usable. You know what I mean by that? Those like
Yeah.
red, yeah,
Yep. I remember those. Yeah.
yeah, like red things. You put the little disc in, and you
Yep. I
could
had one of
see
those
that.
as a kid. Yeah.
Yep, I did too.
Yep.
And this one was one of the first ones ever made, and that had been left behind by somebody. And so this house, as I'm sure you can imagine, was very, very active, very active. And I was in my full bloom of curiosity at that point. I wouldn't talk about anything else really at the time. I was probably really annoying to a lot of people at my school, but uh, but you'd hear disembodied voices, you would hear footsteps going up and down the stairs, and looking directly at the stairs, things would move on their own. And one night I was at a pretty big party, and it was a big house, and there was a room that was the size of a ballroom. In fact, I think it had been used as a ballroom at one point. Now it was just a party room. And I was in this room, and there were a bunch of people, and in the middle of the room was this huge, huge piece of furniture. It looked like, it must have been a bar of some kind, I think. It was, chrome and had frosted glass shelves, and was probably like, I might be exaggerating, but I think it was like 12 or 13 feet tall and like, 5 feet wide. Huge, huge piece of furniture, just kind of like askew in the middle of the room, and I noticed it because 'cause I'd never seen it before. I spent a lot of time there. I asked someone later, and they're like, "Oh, you saw our phantom piece of furniture." Um, that
Wow.
appears in the middle of the room once in a great while, and
Wow.
then it will be gone. And it did happen one other time, like, I think maybe a year later or something, maybe 2 years later, it appeared again. I saw it. I knew at that point what it was. I watched it for a very, very long time. Nothing happened. It remained, but it was just it didn't interestingly have any kind of feeling to it. It seemed like it belonged there. It wasn't like I didn't get any kind of, energetic reading from it or anything like that. But that sounds like what we're talking about, which is this energetic, you know, uh, what's the word that you used?
Imprint.
Yeah, imprint.
Hmm.
But still, there's energy in that item that allowed it to be an imprint. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's wild. A
Uh,
phantom
yeah.
furniture. That's yeah, and I'm comfortable in response to your story saying like I don't know what that is because that and that's the thing like I think I'm starting to get more comfortable with no one really knows. This goes back to what you were saying like in terms of words, even words encapsulating ideas regarding this. I don't think any of us will know all the answers ever until we're in the spirit back in the spirit world. And I think I have theories, but we can always have theories. But like a phantom furniture, I've never heard anything like that before. And maybe physical objects do have an intelligent energy I'm not aware of, or maybe it was the soul of someone who used to frequent there that was trying to show some kind of symbol or bring attention to something. But yeah, I think sometimes I'm comfortable just saying, you know what, I don't know what that is.
No,
That
no.
is so
Yeah.
wild. And I think the problem a lot of people have or the struggle people have is when they don't understand something they just want to disregard it or dismiss it. And anything's possible.
That would be a hard one for people to believe, I know. But it is true, and I've heard of I had I won't go into the long story of it, but I had another experience involving a piece of furniture as well in that same neighborhood.
Wow.
I don't think it's connected with I don't think it's that the neighborhood has a furniture thing. I think it's just that the neighborhood is so active. So active. It's yeah, Little Italy in the Bronx. Um, but
Okay.
but there are many people who have experienced furniture that is connected to some kind of spirit, energy, person, experience, and so I resonate with what you said that perhaps that bar was just a very, very active part of that house for a very long time, and some powerful energy frequented that, maybe even died from alcohol abuse or something like that, and therefore it's an imprint, and it's
Hmm.
more connected to that being than it is to the furniture itself.
Yeah.
But that's a pretty powerful being nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, I have definitely heard stories of this is a little bit different, like as opposed to furniture appearing out of nowhere. And but like I mean, I think you even shared your story about like Robert the doll, and I hope
Mm,
you don't mind me bringing it up. But
nope.
yeah, there's things like that, like objects that carry energies that, and then I have a friend whose mother. When she was a little girl, her mother bought a piano, like a mini, I forgot what they're called, like one of those mini, not a full grand piano, but a mini one from an antique store. And when they brought into the house, they had honestly very terrifying
Really?
experiences. Yeah, like she would wake up. My friend remembers someone breathing on her while she was asleep. It would wake her up in the middle of the night. She was seeing shadows go from room to room in the hallway.
Mm,
Um,
I'm getting
there was
really I'm experiencing that fear.
there was a
That
lot of depressing energy. Yeah, and when they got rid of the piano, and I would have burnt it, but but they gave it away to somebody for free who was interested. I would have blessed literally the hell out of that piano. But and that's another topic, hell. But anyways, but yeah, so yeah, she when they got rid of this piano, it just night and day. Yeah.
Huh.
Kind of
Wow.
fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel about the idea of evil spirits. I don't have an I lean more towards we all go to the same place, but I'm not going to confidently say that there is nothing evil on the other side because I don't know. I don't
Mhm.
know. I've definitely heard stories that make me believe otherwise. Um, I just find it all really fascinating.
It's hard to say. It's hard. The word evil does seem like the best word to use in in this question, but it also is such a loaded word.
Mm.
It's associated with morality and with religion, and it turns me off for sure, the word, just because it's not quite what we mean, I don't think, but there's no other word that isn't insulting,
Yeah.
to use. And so I I agree. I think that we all go to the same place too. I wonder if that energy is, I mean, we're powerful beings. Humans and all sentient beings are powerful, powerful beings. And so are we able to personify, entityize, for I make up a word there, the collective unconscious, are we able to create from our from whatever it is, our untapped feelings, our anger, our rage, unexpressed, and does it become an entity that then
Mm.
has its own animate, in a way. I don't know. Have you had any personal experiences with anything that you would say is that entity personally?
Mm. No. And when I thought that I did, I realized later that it was my fear painting the picture and it wasn't actually evil. If that makes sense. There was when I was in Gettysburg actually at this one the Farnsworth House Inn, there was
Mhm.
a very terrifying moment that happened. It was just something knocked over a chair above our heads and it was a really loud bang. So because it came out of first of all, we were at and when this happened, we were in a cellar that they had decorated very frighteningly. It was
I
and
know
I was
the
actually
seller.
I was, and the Warrens were known to, the Warrens were
Yeah.
there in the 80s, I think, or the 70s. And so they have this mirror there that Elizabeth Warren, I think was her name, the wife of the
No,
couple.
that's the senator.
Oh my goodness.
Um, Lorraine.
Laura
Lorraine
Elizabeth.
Warren.
If Elizabeth Warren starts to pick up paranormal
I
investigation,
vote
I
for
may
her for
just vote for her
president.
again. Yeah. Lorraine Warren. So she had told them, you need to get rid of this mirror in the cellar. But they had a shaman cleanse it, they brought it back. But she told them get rid of it. So the mirror's still there. People tell you, they tell you like go up to the mirror and do whatever. So I don't mess with that stuff. I like whether I really believe in it or not. I'd rather not mess with it. But they decorated the cellar like a very depressing Victorian funeral parlor with really
Mhm.
creepy images up. So that is setting the tone for me as someone who likes spooky things. And then this loud bang above my head, I'm thinking it was something evil that made this loud bang because of the environment I'm in, the loudness of the sound. And I even asked the psychic at that time, a psychic mentor of mine, like, please clear my energy. I'm really scared. And whatever the psychic did helped me. But I think now I realize, no, we asked them, can you make a noise? And they made a noise. So,
Mhm.
to answer your question, long story short, I don't feel like I've ever come across anything evil or bad. Um, Low energy, maybe. I think that's where I want to make the distinction because to me,
That's a good way to
evil,
put it, low energy.
like low spectrum energy, or yeah, because when I've gone to like in Savannah, Georgia, I fell in love with Savannah, Georgia, and there were some places there where I felt like, um, almost like when you have like a Debbie Downer in a social group, you just know that's how it felt like. It wasn't something evil, but you could feel like, oh, okay, well, the energy's kind of, mm, it's not pleasant, but it's not evil. It's just kind of like, you know.
Mhm.
And I've experienced that walking into rooms before, but I have yet to like in readings. I have not come across anybody coming through. Even there have been people that like a sitter has told me they don't want to talk to, they had a bad relationship with, but when that soul comes through, I don't feel that they're a bad soul, but they do
Mhm.
take responsibility for how they harmed somebody. um but outside of that, no. That was a very long answer to your question, but I have not
No, I'm
experienced anything evil or menacing. I hope I don't. But yeah. Yeah.
I have. I have had uh personal encounters with that energy. And such that it started at a certain point. I think I was about 15 years old when it started, and it followed me. I had numerous experiences with the same energy up until I was, in my early 20s. And I was really ashamed of it. It seemed like I couldn't tell anyone about it. except for the people who experienced it with me. There were
Mm.
people who experienced it with me, and that's not totally true. I used to tell people about this one of these experiences on a regular basis to the point where one of my friends had to be like, "Stop calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning to back you up on the thing that happened, please." But I didn't what I really didn't d felt ashamed of was that I felt that this energy had somehow become attached to me because I asked for it. Like delved into the Ouija board stuff when I was very young um and opened that door and I went so far as to feel that some of my personal life had been affected by this energy, which is what I was ashamed of and I felt embarrassed to say and because it sounds cuckoo and most of the people in my life at the time would think it was cuckoo and would say so. So I kept it to myself. I don't anymore. I don't feel that way and I don't keep it to myself anymore. But and I don't believe it either. I don't think that my personal life was actually affected by this energy because I don't think this energy has power over me. But nonetheless, it is an energy that is very heavy, very powerful, and has hate associated with it. Um, I think it can also be transmuted into the
Hmm.
light, but it's a real, it's definitely a real palpable energy form.
Yeah, what's coming up for me as you say that is I think that there is a lot of choice in the universe, obviously, and as we know it, and in the spirit world as well. And I've heard and read near death experiences where people have died, and then a voice or a relative who's passed, a guide asks them, "Do you want to stay or do you want to go back?" And I thought that's so interesting because everything that I was taught growing up is it's not up to you. Like you die and you're told where you're gonna go, up or
Mhm.
down, sideways,
Mhm.
limbo, purgatory. And so I thought, oh, it's interesting that a lot of people have been asked when they have crossed over whether they want to come back or not. So that makes me think or theorize, can't say for sure, that maybe like if I'm a person who has harbored a lot of hate in the physical world or a lot of depression, um and didn't had no desire to seek help for myself, that maybe I am holding on to that as I pass, and I'm holding on to it on the other side. And like you were saying, that part of me, you were alluding to this before, that part of me is staying here, or maybe I've decided as a soul to stay here because I'm way too, we use the word grounded in a kind of negative connotation. I'm way too grounded in my physical life experience to be able to go cross over to the light. And
Mhm.
I've heard that word being used before, the word grounded. Like sometimes we can be way too grounded in our materialistic things and our physical experiences. And there has to be a balance, right? Between our chakras and between the root and up to the God chakra. So I think it is possible for, I'll speak for myself, for me to have to harbor so much anger that it makes me want to, that I want to stay and feel like I'm not letting go of something. And that's
Mm.
why I think when people describe a ghost, quote unquote, they use the word stuck. But I really think that soul is deciding to harbor resentments and harbor something that's keeping them here.
Mm. And I wonder if in life as we live it in each life, if we work to find that balance, we have an easier time making that transition. I mean, it's kind of like what the Buddhists say in the Tibetan Book of the Dead about preparing for death by on a daily basis meditating on it, accepting it, making it a normal part of your experience, knowing that in any moment it could be your final moment on this plane. And then that way, as you're transitioning, you're in peace rather than in fear, and then can make that transition peacefully and have a better reincarnation, or better isn't the word that they use, but a more peaceful reincarnation as well. Not a hungry ghost,
Mm.
not a bad spirit, but rather a human, which is the ideal incarnation. Sounds like the same kind of thing. It's an inability to make the transition. And so maybe that's a hungry ghost. Maybe that's what the Buddhists are referring to as a hungry ghost, one that is here because of an inability to go there, kind of.
Yeah, and if someone's identity, sense of self identity is so rooted in the things they possess, or it's so rooted in abusive relationships or people that they've resented or hated. Um, to me, then it's no surprise that because our identity is so rooted in these things of the physical life, that something about themselves is going to be held, not held back. Again, choice. They're going to hold themselves back somehow here. Again, I don't know if what I'm saying is fact or not. I'm just theorizing,
No.
but to me, it there's a part of me that thinks that makes sense, and that
Mhm.
that kind of for me validates more this belief I have that we do have a choice, just like we have a choice in how we behave or act in our physical lives. We have a choice in how we experience our afterlife too.
Mhm. Yep. And I feel, of course we don't know that any of what we're saying is has any validity at all. But number one, of course, it has validity to us in our own experience. But then also, number two, I think that everything you personally strongly believe to be true and connect to intuitively probably has some basis in fact. It's just that when the final reveal is shown to you, when you see the real truth behind all that is, you see that little glimmer of what you felt to be true, but there's no way you could possibly have fathomed it fully in
Mm-hmm.
this suit, right? So
Yeah.
eventually that truth will become clearer to you, but it's just now just a grain of truth.
I do also believe that the spirit world, the universe molds itself to our frame of reference. So some people, when they pass, they see the Virgin Mary. Some people pass, they see Jesus. Some people pass, they see another religious figure they associate with. And I think those are all valid experiences. I think the universe molds itself to what our, well, these are stories of people who have passed and come back, though. Maybe
Mm,
that's a key too. And it seems like, at least for those who have had near death experiences and have come back, it's as if the universe or the spirit world was able to deliver a symbol or a message to them in a way that, let me see if I can get this right. In a way that that soul, when it's back in the human body, could understand. Because that is the
mm,
experience of that human, is to believe in those figures, that frame of reference. So it, again, and the intelligence, I mean, the spirit world is so intelligent and can do anything and everything. So I think it speaks to, like, each person's personal belief and experiences are valid, and those experiences can shape how we experience the process of dying and the afterlife.
mhm. And all of those symbols and belief systems that create our experience in the afterlife or in a near death experience or in a psychedelic experience, whatever it may be, I think that they are all coming from the same blueprint. It's a different storyline behind the same blueprint. So it's just like you said, it's your human translation of a thing that is ineffable. And it's how you come to understand the ineffable by creating the storyline that most suits you to understand it. If you are a person who connects with the Virgin Mary, then the Virgin Mary is going to be your source of strength. If you're a person who connects with Lord Shiva, that's the person, or that's the being that's going to translate to you the meaning of compassion, love, forgiveness, and all that is. So it's definitely individual, but in the end, it's all the same thing, right? It's just
Yeah,
our different way of understanding it.
that makes
Um,
life more interesting, I think.
Absolutely. And being I am a person I'm interested in all facets of spirituality. I'm interested in Hinduism and interested in Islam. I'm interested in Buddhism. I'm interested in Christianity. All of it, I think, is coming from the same place. The truth behind it all is the same.
Did you just shift your camera?
I did, yep.
Oh, I was hearing one thing. Was it spirit?
Nope, it was me. It
Okay,
was
never
me playing
mind.
with the wire.
All good, all good.
Uh,
Got excited for a moment. Like,
yeah.
spirit confirms. But they
Well,
do.
Juan, absolute spirit confirm here. We'll let them confirm again. There you go, spirit confirmed. um, this has been a really amazing conversation, Juan. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for
It's a pleasure.
yes, it has. So amazing. And I can't wait to do it again. You have a couple of things. First of all, you have your own amazing podcast that I love to listen to, Third Eye Sight, right?
Yes, yes.
On Spotify, on Google, and on Apple.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Yep.
That's an awesome one. Third Eye Sight. And then what else? What's your website?
Yeah, my website is juanfranciscospirit.com. And you can find me on Instagram with a Juan at Juan Third Eye and
Okay.
all social media with that username.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. This was great. As I
Thank you. It
said,
was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
it was. And to all of our viewers, thank you so much for listening, and we love you.